Good afternoon, good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to what is my first podcast for a webinar for Fire Middle East. And what I think will purport to be a really interesting topic. Whilst it sounds fairly sterile and very bland, the two minds that we have to share on this, the exploration of the development of codes and standards in the GCC, I think is a really interesting topic. Okay? My name is Bob Ray, and I'm here to host it. I currently do a bit of program management, trainer. I'm a retired firefighter and done my 30 years. And I've known these two gentlemen, one of them for a long period of time and one of them for less, but I class them as good friends, and I'm really pleased to share this time with you this morning. Okay. I'm going to introduce Ahmed first, because I see that he is the link into ESL, and ESL are our sponsors for today, and I'd like to thank them for engaging in this webinar and seeing the value of doing it. So Ahmed Yousry is currently working for ESL. He has a mind that I admire. I came across him when we did some panel work last year, and I found that his delivery style, his depth of knowledge was fantastic. He comes from an engineering and construction and management background, which again, when you look at what we're trying to do this morning with these codes and standards, he comes to it from a very wide-ranging ability. And then my very good friend Pete Stephenson, who we joined the fire service together some many years ago. So we have a long-standing history. And Pete moved over into the dark arts of fire engineering and has become very well respected in that arena. And again, his knowledge of codes and standards globally is something I think will add an awful lot to this seminar this morning, or this webinar this morning. So I'm just going to give them a couple of seconds to introduce themselves as well, to make sure that I haven't missed anything. And then we're going to go into a discussive forum. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and I will try and bring them in. If we don't get to answer your questions as we go through the webinar, if you put your email in, we will come back to you, hopefully to answer your questions to close it out at the end. But there you go. So I'll hand it over to Ahmed just in case I've missed anything, and then Pete.
So my name is Ahmed Yousry. I'm working here in ESL as a senior business development engineer. I've been with ESL for more than 2 years now. It passed very quickly, and it's been a very nice journey for me. I've learned a lot, of course, during these times. Previously, I've been working as a fire protection engineer as well. I was working with different consultants, and actually, I was working also in Egypt for a period of time in fire protection design and in consultancy. So that's basically my background, and I will let Peter also introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you. I think Bob did a very sort of detailed intro. I'll just sort of add a few extra points. Obviously, Bob mentioned we joined the fire service together. I moved into fire safety and enforcement with the fire service back in the UK, before then moving into consultancy, and was very lucky to work on infrastructure projects, working for Network Rail in the UK. When there was a lot of very interesting things with regard to the development of codes in the UK for rail. If you think about London, pretty much all the main stations in London terminate, so the codes evolved around single direction travel on long platforms. So one of the points I'm trying to get over is codes do evolve generally through circumstances, whether it's a disaster, an incident, or just the nature of the dynamics within a building. I've then moved over to the Middle East 11 years ago now. Been very fortunate to work on quite a few significant major projects and giga projects in the kingdom. I'm always very nervous of reflecting on the word expert. I think being an expert in the field, sometimes can lead you down a bit of a dangerous route. I like to be able to think that understanding codes and applying codes is more important than understanding the legislation, because it changes so dynamically. And we were talking about this earlier, that, you know, with innovation, new products coming onto the market, it is a very, very exciting time in the fire safety and engineering world.
I think, Pete, yeah, a really good point. As I say, we were just chatting earlier in our pre testing of the systems and everything, about having been able to understand what the code is asking you to design, so understanding the development of fire in a building allows you to apply the codes in a more measured manner. And obviously in the UK, we have a lot of things what we call stable door legislation. So something happens and we try and close the door afterwards. Now, when we look at the codes and everything else, the development of codes, the proactive side of it is really important. So, and I think that's how we can probably look at this morning. Look at how we try and be proactive in the development of codes in the GCC, and especially in the UAE to start with. And as Ahmed was saying, how they differ from every emirate. So we'll focus on Dubai and then open it up. So we include people and then try and move on into how to innovate things and how new innovations come in and how difficult or challenging that can be to get that into the marketplace. So how do we think, or how do we feel about the development of the codes and standards in the UAE? I'll open it to you, Ahmed, to start with.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's very fascinating what the UAE is doing in actually in the perspective of construction, and we have all witnessed in the past 20 years to 25 years even a really an evolution in the construction field in general. We have seen many high-rise buildings are coming up. It's just fascinating. And with this construction and evolving, also Dubai and the UAE have really evolved rapidly when it comes to the UAE, the fire safety standards in the UAE and the regulations of this. If we go back by time, I mean, before barrier 2010, they was guided, the fire regulation here in the UAE was guided by the NFPA and the International Building Code and the ISO. And then they found the need of having a UAE national fire code that applies to the UAE, which was created in 2011. And there was always, as we know, there's a life cycle for any fire code or any code in general standard, and the life cycle start with developing this code or the standard, and then the implementation, and the most important and crucial is the revision and reviewing and updating that standard. There was some in the UAE fire code amendment that happened in 2013 after a couple of fires that happened in high-rise buildings, where they started to make more restrictions on the external facade requirements to enhance the fire safety and enhance it, and also the cladding material. There was also another revision in 2017 where they actually introduced also the full assembly testing, for example, for cladding for the NFPA 285. They have also put in this version, have introduced the classification of super high-rise building for buildings above 90 meters. And then the latest version of the standard was in 2018. And actually, they have been working now for the new standard. Hopefully, it will be the new code. Hopefully, it will be released by next year. I hope so. We hope so. So there have been a lot of work and a lot of development, a lot of revisions. We're still working on this. We're still working from a federal level and also from each and every emirate. As you know, there is the federal civil defense, and then you comes under it every emirate, the 7 emirates, and then it may differ. There's some regulations comes or for Dubai, for example, that are not applicable in Abu Dhabi or the vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah, some very good points there.
Yeah, I'm busy scribbling away as I'm learning as we go through. So for me, this is a really great experience because I enjoy the conversations, but also the learning points that come out for me. So hopefully, if I'm learning, other people are learning too. So Peter, what do you think about what Ahmed said there?
Well, I'm just reflecting on that. Like you say, there's probably key takeaways from that is within the UAE, you've got the 7 Emirates that you've got the federal structure, but then you've got each emirate with their own sort of nuances. Pan that out further around the GCC, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, all have different codes, and there is the GCC code that sits sort of in the background. But again, comparing it to the UK, the UK primary legislation is driven by government making an act. You shall do it, or you shall achieve this. Then you get the secondary legislation, which is a little bit watering down, going into sort of building regulations and gives you ideas how to do things. So from an international design perspective, when you get teams from all around the world working on some of the lovely projects we have here in the Middle East, the general understanding of the local legislation, the local approval processes, the requirements on a product, for example. One of the key questions I get asked when we go to Intersec is, a manufacturer will bring a product over and it can be really, really, cutting edge technology, great piece of equipment or whatever. But they've not gone through any of the testing processes. And I think that was what we were saying earlier, you have to go make sure you do get the certificates of conformity and the approvals. You have to go through the correct test laboratory. So there's lots of these common mistakes that do get made, isn't there?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing about people understanding the marketplace. And I use marketplace as a loose term with regards to when you're trying to bring a new product in, and understanding the different testing regimes, the different standards that are applicable globally. So what do you see as some of the challenges about bringing some new item into the GCC? Ahmed.
So I would say the challenges that we always face when a manufacturer comes with an innovative product. First, there is two challenges. First challenge is that product doesn't have a standard or international standard, as we say, for that product that can be applied to it. And the way we deal with this is that we have to go through also again a life cycle of developing a standard. So the first thing we do is we do a visibility study for the product and the end-use application of the product, the end-use application. We do a risk study also to understand the risk associated with the product and how can we test the product. And also part of this process is the collaboration. So we have to collaborate with the industry experts, the policymaker, the third parties, to come up with a standard or develop a standard not only specific to a manufacturer, but just to be used for every manufacturer, for the pattern of this product and the end use application. After we do this, is we have to get this standard technically reviewed by technical expert here and also in the technical committee in, for example, I'm talking now about Dubai Civil Defense. They have to review the standard and the product, and they have to see if this is the best practice for testing that product. And after this, we do pilot testing, what we call pilot testing, and then if it's working, then we can issue a DXB COC for the product where it can be sold here. But it might not be applicable for other Emirates, but it can be applicable. But this is how we can deal with this challenge and try to introduce the new products and in a legal framework where it can be safe to be used and to be applied.
Yeah, it's a bit of forward thinking within the industry, really, isn't it? Because so many times on projects, the actual length of a project from design, master planning, moving through the schematic, getting the approvals, an innovative product might be proposed at the front end, but there's got no standard for it to match. So that, as I'm saying, that has to be sort of addressed. But then you might get another product comes in later on in the project, and it could be that cycle again, the next iteration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think, Pete, you've hit a really good point, and backing up on what Ahmed has said. We've actually got Midhoon has asked a question or just made a statement that I've seen some products are coming without listings and approvals. So again, the use of a non-tested, non-approved product, what does that do for the manufacturer or the person that's proposing it? Is there a retrospective, or would it not be allowed, or what? What advice could we give to Midhoon?
So as I said, we look into every case as an individual case. We don't have something for in general. We look into this individually as being in ESL, as we are considered now or working as the technical arm for Dubai Civil Defense. We often get requests of looking into certain kind of products that are innovative, doesn't have a standard, or we sometimes get that some standards, some products that have international standard, but the standard are not in the UAE fire code, which legally doesn't allow the manufacturer to register their product. And in that case, we make a technical case study about that, and we also check if this is the best practices for the product internationally. And then we review it with Dubai Civil Defense, their technical committee review it, and then they make a decision based on this. And then if the decision is positive, we can issue a Dubai specific CUC for them, and then they can register their product.
Hopefully that's answered Midhoon's statement. But again, if I suppose my thought process is, if we get approval for something in Dubai, how difficult is it then to achieve an approval in Abu Dhabi or Sharjah or RAK? What would the process be for that?
I believe the process for this is have to go then, if you want it to be generalized or for the UAE, then we have to review it with the technical committee from the Federal Civil Defense, and then it could be added to the code actually. So if there is a product that is not in the code, or the standard are not in the code, or a new standard, then what we do is we raise this to the Federal Committee, and then they make a decision based on this. And then once it's in the code or the new revision of the code, then it can be applied for all Emirates at this moment. But in that case, you have to approach every civil defense that's related to the Emirates. For example, if you want to go to Abu Dhabi specific, you go to Abu Dhabi Civil Defense. We have been working with projects and special product specifically for some Emirates, even for Abu Dhabi. They require this. They have specific requirements for some product. We fulfill this requirement with the manufacturer, and then they can register their product. But it could be done. But again, it's on a higher level, federal level, it's a longer process.
That's why it's really important that design teams don't work in their individual silos, and they're all talking and sharing information to make sure that these things can be addressed.
Yes.
And you'll remember, Bob, back in the UK, there were the local county acts. So you could have a type of building that was built, say, in Berkshire, where me and Bob used to work and enforce fire safety. The exact same building could be built 10 miles away in a different county, and a different act would apply. And this got very frustrating for the big sort of warehouse distribution companies, because they were looking to reduce design costs and construction costs and have a type built, but they kept on getting pushed back by the local authorities because it didn't comply necessarily with their local act. And similarly, it could apply in the UAE.
Exactly.
Yeah, the local acts was something quite interesting, really. And as you say, that the application of something within 10 miles different might need sprinkling, might not. The smoke control differences, etc., etc. No, that was a real challenge. So I think one of the things with the UAE is that you have your code, like the life safety code, on the which tries to tie all the Emirates together. So there's some sort of rigidity around that. So I suppose what my next avenue I'm going to look at, or try and push you into, is if you see a change in international standards or international, because Philip Wilson's come up with, how do you see the change from BS 476 to EN 13501 affecting the UAE protection codes? And again, obviously, that's international legislation or international standards that are being changed. How do we morph that into the UAE? And obviously, if there's a change in the NFPA, because the way I look at it, you see the multitude of different international codes come into the way the UAE has developed its own specific codes. How do you see that working, Pete?
I was actually going to defer to my good colleague here, actually, because I was going to mention fire doors, but I'll let Ahmed. This is a really good question. That
yes.
Really good question.
So of course, the UAE is also not only closed on itself. The UAE also is learning and adapting to the new versions of the standard worldwide, and also is adapting to other standard. Till now, there is no change. I mean, as long as it's in the UAE fire code, the BS standard 476, it's going to be still can be accepted. I personally believe that this could be changing with the new code, maybe. But officially, I don't have anything to say to this, because till now, as long as it's in the UE fire code, then you still can legally register your product according to this. I believe also if there will be changing, there will be a period that will be given. Like I know the UK have given, the Parliament have given 5 years for the fire resistant parts of BS to adapt, the manufacturer to adapt to this change and find the other relevant standards to test and certify their products and use it. For the EN 13501, there is a new revisions which have been issued, and as per the UE fire code, is all the product that tested and certified have to be according to the latest version of the standard. So as long as there's a new version, then the manufacturer have to update their testing and certification to this new version to be able to register their products.
Yeah, and in the wider picture across the GCC, you know, a lot of the codes that have been based around the International Code Council, Saudi Building Code, for example, you know, you won't be able to do a search through a document and find a reference to a British standard like 476 or BSEN. It will be UL, FM, ASTME references. But the interesting fact in the wider picture is things like SASO, who recognise the BSEN ISO standards has been acceptable for the kingdom. However, then it might be SASO approved, but my understanding is when it goes through to the authority having jurisdiction, there could still be an issue with it being approved for the project. So there's potential minefields everywhere we look. Again, the collaboration then becomes really important. And I smiled when I mentioned fire doors. Fire doors is always a topic for hot discussion with, you know, the American standards requiring the hose stream test. So yeah, there's lots of pitfalls, isn't there?
Yes,
lots of pitfalls.
And I think that's one of the probably the strengths of the UAE is that they have they look outwards to then look inwards in their development of stuff. And I think that's really, then they take the best practice globally and make it fit for purpose. And I think that's a really strong thing when you look at the codes that are there. So when you look at the development, you know, how that comes together, I think that's a really strong point. I think it's really something that the UAE should be proud of, and the GCC should be proud of, in the way that they pull best practice to make themselves recognised internationally as being a global, a golden standard, and somewhere we should be aiming for. Because Panjay, he's asked, and I think you've answered it, is about who's the approving authority for like Oman. And as you say earlier, we talked about each individual emirate approves its own standard while still conforming to the UAE, the federal codes as well. So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah. Just on that one, Bob, I think in Muscat it's slightly different. It's the Royal Omani Police.
Royal Omani Police, yes.
So again, other sort of actors need to be part of the conversation right from the very start. So, you know, don't go to them right at the end of a project expecting approval, and then there's some issues.
Yeah. So some of the common mistakes we get, I would say challenges, is you get the manufacturer coming specifically from Europe or other parts, not from the Middle East, basically, and they want to be in the market, in the GCC market in the Middle East, and they are not very aware of each standard. And the common thing that they come with the European standards, which is some of them, or most of them are approved here, but they come with the European ideology and they have not done the research about their market. So one of the first questions that we always ask here in ASL for manufacturer, which markets are you targeting? Because based on this, we can identify which standards he need to test and certify to, which legal or regulation that he need to comply to be able to sell their products. Also, as we all know, there is in the GCC is one of the areas where they have most of the regulation. They have a list of approved labs, and this is very important also because many manufacturer comes and not aware of this list. They have their product tested and certified with an accredited labs, but are not on the list and approved in the country that they want to register their products. And then what we always ask is like, you have to make your research before getting into the market, because then you spend money, you spend effort on getting your product tested and certified, and you think it's ready, but then when you come here, it becomes a different story, or there's a different.
Yeah, because at the moment there's the wind project, which is the second biggest project in the UAE at the moment, where the gaming license and the wind resorts is. I mean, that's in Ras Al Khaimah.
Yes.
So, you know, the design team or suppliers that are all fully approved for civil defence in Dubai could potentially have a bit of a shock going to Ras Al Khaimah, thinking they've got the right approvals.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that's a really valuable point, in that it's about any manufacturer doing their research and being proactive, and as Ahmed says, using a registered or licensed facility to get your approvals. And I think that's something that lots of people will fall foul of, because you think you're doing the right thing, but actually you haven't done your research first. So I think that's a very valid point for anybody that is looking to launch something into any country, not just the GCC. I think that's something.
Just to add to that, Bob, you're 100% right. It actually extends to the wider design team and the project team. You know, the manufacturer needs to, or supplier needs to be working with a team that he can feel confident with, that do know the rules and regulations, rather than getting to that point where they're going for the approvals to the AHJ and then the red flag comes up. Not approved. And then another little common issue happens is when you actually get to the construction phase, the contractor may look to replace a product or system with a similarly approved or tested system, but again, it might not be through the accredited lab.
Exactly.
So there, you know, small things that can potentially crippling to a project.
Yes.
I think your statement there, that if they don't do their research and make sure they've got the right approvals, it can be crippling to a project, is something that really is probably something we need to take to heart, because there's nothing more disappointing than, you know, getting halfway through something and finding it fails through a legislative failure or a lack of preparation, and etc. Because from our conference last year when we were out in Riyadh, I remember a statement, and I can't remember who made it. So forgive me if I steal it. But when you look at legislation, codes, and the regulations, they can be your shield to protect you, you know, to show that you conform to everything you need to. But they can also be the sword of the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, where they can say no, or they can make you make corrections. What do you think about that statement?
Again, I think it's right on the money. To be honest, you know, when you look at how quickly this region has evolved in the last 20 years, with the types of projects. I was looking at small photos of Dubai Marina the other day, you know, 22 years ago, and they were just digging out the canal, and now you've got multiple buildings. Now the rapid growth in construction products, you know, probably the approvals then weren't as rigorous, and the codes weren't as rigorous back then as they are now. So, when we get into the cycle of repurposing buildings, what might be there currently could not be, and it could then be another hidden cost for a project.
Exactly. And this also needs to be addressed in the early before changing the occupancy and.
And another thing with just wanted to quickly mention is the fire and emergency response by civil defence. Things do go horribly wrong. It's fully understanding all the assumptions built in with the code. What's the response time of the civil defence going to be? If there is an issue with remoteness or adequacy of resources, do you need to put in additional safety features to add that tier of protection to a project? Again, if that's not identified early, it can be an issue.
I think that's a very valid point, Pete. And when you look at some of the huge scales of construction that are ongoing, the final project is obviously the handover and delivery of that, and the management of the building going forwards is really important. And also we have the construction design and management regs in the UK, and how that lends into, once you've handed the building over, that everything's fit for purpose. But I see one of the big challenges also is how we maintain the safety of that in its construction phase. And so how do we apply some of the standards and regulations in the construction phase to meet the outcome at the end of it?
Do you want me to just jump on that? I've been to several serious incidents that have happened during construction where basically the car parks or podium levels have been used for storage. There's been an incident. There's been lack of fire separation. But where we get projects that are quite remote, again, the NFPA codes and fire code as well in the UAE do require there are certain requirements placed on the client, the contractor, the design team, etc. And there should be someone responsible for the site safety, making sure there's adequate fire protection. And even if it's a high-rise building, the introduction early of the rising mains, sprinklers, because looking for partial possession. So it's looking at that full risk analysis. I always like to encourage the use of a construction site fire strategy that will identify key people at risk and just give some of that, the high level risks that, hot works, spatial separation. Right, sometimes just a little bit of thought and common sense can de-risk a project quite significantly.
Yes. And we saw many incidents during construction where fires happens and it's really bad.
I actually had to walk down a 74 flights of a building that was on fire a few years ago, and I think I ate for a few weeks after that, to be honest. So it's not a lot of fun, but you do need to make sure that the whole project is safe, from the client's perspective as well. Make sure that the workers are safe, the project's safe, and the client's brand is protected as well.
I think protecting the brand is very important. Reputation can be destroyed very quickly for an organisation, and that's not just necessarily for that one project. It can destroy an organisation. So again, when you go back to my statement earlier about codes and the enforcement of codes and being your shield and your sword, if you comply, you are protected, and your organisation, the business continuity and the business sustainability is really a strong driver for why we use Ford's codes and enforcement, and I think that's really something that people should take away from this.
Just on that, just a quick one. There's quite a lot of companies, end users have their own fire standards as well. And again, a common mistake that can happen is the design team overlook the corporate fire safety standards, which may be above and beyond what's actually required in the local fire code. So when it comes to the acceptance of the end user, it can be another potential red flag.
Exactly.
We've got Mohammed has picked up on what we're talking about. Fire risk assessment, urgent point, he's written, which is very true. And we risk assess so many things, but actually the application of fire risk assessment and recognizing like ignition sources, who's at risk. The 5 steps that we do for fire risk assessment is something that really any organisation should be doing it throughout a development phase, throughout a construction phase, so that when we hand the building over, that's all captured within it. I've got a couple of
again. Can I just add a little nugget on that as well, Bob? It's a really, really good point. Once you get up to the building handover, there was a question earlier about the commissioning installation standards, making the assumption that the building is handed over to comply with all the relevant standards. It can be unknown what the imported risk will be from the building user. So you will know the occupancy of the building in its entirety or various parts. But if it can change dynamically on a daily basis. If you have maintenance work, replacing doors or whatever, or just a higher fuel load come in, it can seriously impact on that fire risk assessment, which is key.
I totally agree, and I think human behaviour is something that is very difficult to factor in, and we talked a long time ago about education, not in this webinar, but we talked about educating our occupiers in what their responsibilities are, especially in high-rise buildings, not just commercial, but also residential, and their need to maintain the fire safety structures, fire safety measures that are inbuilt to ensure the building meets the code and exceeds the code and protects them for their escape.
I would like to add to this. There's a saying where you say buildings are safe until occupants move in. Where, of course, buildings, yes, we try to make buildings safe as much as possible. But as a proactive, there's the system that Dubai Civil Defense or Civil Defense have been investing in developing an AI system, where basically that AI system is predicting the likelihood of the occurrence of a fire incident in some of the neighborhood with a specific community demography, and that system basically send an SMS with containing fire protection, fire prevention content, educational content to the residents. Through a link where they can open the link, and this link contain avatar of a civil defense officer, where it go or do the educational video in their own language of the demography of the language, to help occupants to understand the risk of fire and how to prevent it from happening, or what is the acts that you do that can cause fire that maybe you don't think about it.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I have to say, when I first saw a presentation on that AI and the ability to communicate to the community in their own language, I was so impressed by that. Because again, the human behavior is we would react to the voice, and and when we're told to do something, we tend to respond to it. If we hear a fire alarm, we all understand what we should do. But if I'm told what to do when I hear a fire alarm in my own language, then I tend to follow it. And I think that innovation is something that's it's phenomenal, and I can only see it growing. And if it's not accepted globally, then I think there's something that we're all, as a community in the fire safety, we should be doing more to push it. There's a couple of sorry.
Yeah, Bob, you mentioned human behaviour as well. The guest experience in buildings is becoming very, very critical now, particularly in the entertainment and holiday market. If you just look at the dynamics of someone travelling through an airport, there's millions of people go through the airport in a year. Their key focus is if they're travelling on their own with their family, they've got the luggage, drop the luggage off, get the full experience. The last thing they really want is to get involved in an evacuation, etc. So it is very important that everything collectively does work together.
Absolutely. And you've only got to look back in history when you see how people have behaved in fire. And you look right back to some of the way we developed our evacuation standards in the UK, based upon how do I get people to leave the building. the theatre fire up in Edinburgh, and it was God Save the King, and that gave us our evacuation time. But actually, when you look at the different classifications of building, how that works, it was a really good development. There's a theme that's coming up in some of the questions and statements about Emirates Safety Laboratory accepting products that are all the products certified by bodies approved by Civil Defence, but how do they also, what role do you play in policing products that have been approved and how they're used on a project?
So for the first question, basically we tend to accept. It depends again on the market that they are targeting. Let's say I would say that they are targeting Dubai market, and if the product are certified by certification bodies who are on the list, and these products are not part of the new regulations that have been mandated in January 2024. Yes, we do accept it, and we can certify. But and if these products are before tested and certified before 1st of January 2024, we look at it. We look at the testing evidence, the certification, and we can evaluate this. And yes, we can make a decision onto this. The second, I think the second questions is we are following the rules of Dubai Civil Defense. We and the new regulation, and they said there is always in the life cycle of regulation and what we are talking about, there is always revision and updating. And as we all know that there is a new set of instruction and regulation that have been mandated by Dubai Civil Defense, and we are approving this. And we spoke, I mean, in the beginning about, yes, there is a federal civil defense, but then we have the 7 Emirates, and not necessarily what's approved in Dubai can be approved in Abu Dhabi or approved in Ras Al Khaimah, as you said, for the wind project. So every Emirates have their own also sets or extra set of regulation that have been coming again as all the regulation in the world that comes from lesson learned. As we see some incidents happen, and there is lesson learned from this, and they update and review the regulation. And I think the UAE in general, they are very good at this. They have been adapting, and their agility in this is very, very impressive. So that's what we are doing, yes, as an ESL.
I think again, when the challenges of having 7 Emirates with their own individual abilities to approve or disapprove something, and that's a real challenge. Do you see that they align more closely now, or do you still see them standing alone at times?
Sorry, I didn't catch.
Could you just repeat that, please, Bob? Was it
Do you see the Emirates still standing alone, or do you see them becoming closer in their approvals, or do you still see that there's 2 different polar opposites at times?
I think it's always it comes closer at the end. Sometimes you have a new regulation coming into one emirate, and then it being published to other emirates and then become one. So, but and sometimes it's the opposite. It comes from the federal civil defense and then published downward to all the emirates. So it varies between what is the regulation and what is the need for it.
Yeah, and each emirate has its own sort of own risk profile as well.
Exactly.
So they, things that are important, say in Sharjah, may be slightly different to Dubai or Ras Al Khaimah. So there's a lot of initiatives.
Exactly. So for example, the initiative for Sharjah, when they are removing the cladding from exterior facade, this have not been adopted in Dubai, for example, or Abu Dhabi or any other Emirates. So as we say again, sometimes the Emirates have their own regulation that they see are necessary for their enhancing the safety of the buildings.
Yeah, and then sort of thinking that through, it's the older building stock in Sharjah shows the rules, regulations, and the testing wasn't what it probably should have been at the time. So products got onto the market that can be potentially dangerous.
And I think that succinctly shows how standards and regulations evolve over time. And I think that's a really good example of it. I was trying to draw out how, something in RAC might be approved in Ras Al Khaimah, that is, as you say, and then in Sharjah, they're looking at removing the cladding because of potentially the older building stock. As you say, standards were different when they were built, and now they're recognising the need to close that loop and protect the community. So yeah, no, it's a really good point. I've just seen something come up from Jason Mather, and he states, yeah. Good morning, Jay, or good afternoon, Jason. Nice to see you're on. Codes and standards are vitally important, but when it comes to product selection, it's a race to the bottom price-wise. There is so much technology out there that will distinguish between real and unwanted alarms, enhancing the guest experience, which supports what you're saying, Pete, but this can come at a cost which nobody wants to pay for. Now, I remember David saying over in the Middle East, and again, I'm going to steal his statement from Dave from ESL, where he said that basically cost will be long forgotten after quality is remembered, or something that's paraphrased. And I steal it and I'm going to use it, and I told him I would, so I give him credit for it. But again, I think that really supports what Jason is saying. How do you feel about that? How do you think as the applying the codes and the standards and regulations that we can enforce or advise that quality is recognised?
Well, I think the bottom line is everything needs to meet the appropriate standards. It probably then, in this sort of circumstance, if we get a cheaper product that still meets the requirements, testing and certification, etc., we're probably then into the installation and the commissioning and effectively the cause and effect. So you can have the best fire system in a building, but if it's not programmed correctly to match what the intent of the fire strategy is, then you can have the best quality, yes, but its implementation is not fit for purpose.
And also, I would like to add, also that's part of the implementing the regulation. When it comes, also, I think one of the things that affect the price of a product is what have been done into the research and development on that product. And if all the manufacturer can do the same kind of, have to go through the same kind of structure or process to get their approvals or their product, then you reach at the end to a certain level of fairness in the prices, and then it depends on other factors. How can you price it? So I think also, following and compliance to the regulation when it comes to testing and certification helps to make a fair market for everyone.
Yeah, and it probably feeds back into the procurement strategy for a project as well, to make sure that again, it's a common mistake that's made within design teams is not understanding the scope dictated by the client and actually what the client's ultimate brief is. So if there's an opportunity to save money on the construction, yes, that probably won't be to the benefit of the client if it's a fixed price job or a measuring price, but it can work beneficially to the construction installation teams.
Yes.
I think that was really important to highlight the fact that whilst we may see quality over cost, if it conforms to the relevant regulations and standards, that actually it's fit for purpose, and it comes down to the design team and as you say, the procurement team. But again, it's about evaluation of the product and seeing how it applies and fits in. And often when we look at projects, we look at things in isolation, and it's trying to provide that link and how everything fits together. So the final thing is how it presents to the client at the end. So the complete package. Because again, we've all worked on projects where we try and produce a horse, but because there's so many people with their fingers in it, the horse doesn't actually look like a horse when we've finished with it. And there's lots of sayings about how too many cooks spoil the broth. And sometimes I think that's something that we need to consider when we're pulling things together. We've been going for 50 minutes and it feels like 5. We obviously we can keep going. I'm going to I'll ask people if they got any more questions they want us to try and capture in the next 5 to 10 minutes before I draw to a close. But again, what do you think about the fact that too many cooks spoil the broth, Pete?
Yeah, no, very true. Sort of going back to making sure that the design team is, because quite often you'll get a design team change. Fire consultants may be at the front end for the concept design. It may move to another fire consultant and other disciplines as well. So if you don't get that continuity running through a project, errors can creep in. Like I mentioned, the scope, the client brief, the specifications, everything can sort of blur in a bit. People sort of just focus on hitting the tick in the box of getting the approvals at the relevant time.
I think that consistency of your design construction team and that engineering element all the way through is vital. And I go back to the UK with the CDM, the construction design and management. That maxim tends to be what we try and drive through. And I know that there's stuff in the GCC that does the same. But again, I think that's something that taking that vision, that strategy, what you're trying to achieve, right the way through to the end of the project and the deliverable at the end of it is really, really vital. And understanding, so people like yourself, Ahmed, and Pete, with your understanding of the regulation codes and the standards that are applicable, are vital to the success of projects. And you're able to then, if somebody brings a product, so actually, because it's not approved, we can't use it. However, this is the route to take to maybe try and get it approved, maybe not for this project, but for the future. So I see you as really important parts of that process too. How do you see your roles in that?
Well, for us, for the new in an existing project, or I mean, in the phase of construction, we get what we call project-based testing, where there is a new design or a change in the design, which with the product that is not have been on or not been registered in the UE or civil defense, but is intended to be used in the design of that project. We do something what we call is a project-based testing. We try to apply what's in the code on the project, on the product, and get it tested. And it gets approved sometimes by, after of course reviewing, by DCD as a project base, not for the product as a product, but as the product used in that project as is with the end use application as it is. So this is what we help many of the consultants actually. Which usually it comes from a consultant. They have the design. They don't know if this design will be really safe from a fire protection point of view or passive fire protection. And that's what we do, is a project-based testing, and then it's up to the authority to approve this or not.
Yeah, I think there's a fire engineer, the role that they play, obviously, the meeting the code and the approvals, but it's to be there as a friendly face, basically, because projects are very, very dynamic and things change on a daily basis. And rather than, like you mentioned, about hiding behind, the scope of work, or it's not in my fee, it's important to engage with the project team. And if you don't know, offer to go and help, because it's all, again, part of your own personal learning and education. There was a question I saw earlier pop up about fuel farms, airports. Now, I don't know the answer to that question. It's something that I will go and look at myself, because I'm interested in that. But in simple terms, I would say it's the old, have it as far away as possible you can from the airport, to make it de-risk an incident.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And I didn't ignore the question. I was concentrating on other stuff. When I was doing my hazmat training as a hazmat environmental protection officer, one of the things we talked about with fuel storage was understanding what's in the individual fuel storage containment, because it may not be don't need to protect that particular tank, you might need to protect one that's 3 or 4 away because it's more volatile in that environment. So again, I think with the fuel farm elements and keeping it away from the airports and that, it's about the volatility of the product, how much product's in there, is there airspace above it, etc., etc. There's an awful lot that gets factored into that. So the separation is important. And again, obviously in understanding what the product is and what it can do, because obviously catastrophic failures, look at Buncefield and other oil based fires, when the effect on the environment is part of the thing that we need to factor in it as well. So it's not just the fire codes, we need to think about the environmental effects as we go forwards. And obviously that opens up a whole host of other topics to talk about, and probably not in this webinar because we're at time virtually now. And as I said, it's just flown by. So I'm going to draw to a close. I'm going to offer the last statements out to both of you if you want to say anything to close out. I'll then thank everybody, and I've got a short statement that I want to put together to close us out and go from there. So I'm going to hand it back to Ahmed and Pete just to draw their thoughts to a close for this webinar.
Well, it's been, a delight to, have this opportunity to talk to an audience. You mentioned right at the front end, Bob, about education, sharing experiences. I like to call it trust value. We as individuals, all three of us have developed our own experiences in the industry, and that becomes our trust value to give back to the audience. So hopefully we've been able to assist in that.
And if not, I personally remain available for anyone that needs any, if they have any questions or any concern about the market, the regulations, about the new regulation of Dubai Civil Defense. If there is any confusion, we are happy to answer all the questions. We have a team in ESL that are available every day, and we respond fast to the clients.
I think that's perfect, and I think the fact that our experience puts us where we are, our desire to share our experience and help other people expand their knowledge, skills, and understanding of the environment that we're working in. I think I've really enjoyed this morning. I've learnt loads. So hopefully that the rest of the people on the webinar have done too, and have shared the enjoyment of two old firefighters and a super brain from Ahmed just sitting and chatting and swinging the lamp, as we like to call Pete and I do. There's a statement here from Mohammed in Saudi about the SASO and the journey for approval, where he talks about each of the member organisations, all those people that have a vested interest being part of it, so they will also see the product fits with the shared standards. And I think that's a very valid point as well, and something that I take from the ESL testing side through the civil defence approvals at Emirate and federal levels as being very important. I am going to draw to a close because I see we're at 59 minutes, and as I say, the time has flown by, as it always does when Pete and I are together. I'd like to thank the pair of you for sparing the time for this morning, or this afternoon, evening, wherever we are in the world. And it's always a pleasure to spend time with a pair of you, on a personal level, at an educational level, and obviously as a professional level. It's been fantastic. I think we've meandered through a wide range of topics, as I tend to, as Paul from the Fire Middle East will know. I don't like being scripted. I like to take a challenge. Cheerio, Jason. All the best, and I'll see you soon. The challenge of going down an avenue as it opens up. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity this morning, gentlemen. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to draw the webinar to a close, and if there are any questions, if you want to put them in the chat box quickly with your email addresses, we will try and answer all of those. I know there's a couple we haven't got to as we've gone through. So thank you. And I want to put a statement, and I say I don't like being scripted, but I will read this verbatim, so forgive me. From Fire Middle East, we thank you for attending our webinar today. Quickly highlight an exciting opportunity, which is our second Middle East conference in 2025, which is taking place at the Voga Hotel in Riyadh on the 14th of May. Building on the success of our Fire Middle East conference in Riyadh, which again was an amazing event. We had some great speakers and we explored a huge amount of topics and drew out some really interesting elements. And we talked about collaboration. And I see even the evolution and development of standards and regulations as being collaboration. So again, diverted off. So really important. They're forecasting that we could have over 500 attendees for the next one in 2025, with an exclusive VIP conference for 200 select participants from the region's leading organisations. Join us at this industry-leading and industry-focused and impactful setting. Next year's conference will feature world-leading brands showcasing their solutions, a series of educational workshops, high-level agenda of presentations and discussions with several hours of networking opportunities. The networking opportunities were amazing last year. You could hear the groundswell of noise and energy build in the auditorium as people started to talk and share experiences, which I found was awesome. Most importantly, it's a platform to tackle the critical challenges affecting our industry. By attending, you'll gain invaluable insights to align your business with the transformative goals of the Saudi Vision of 2020. Initiative. We hope to see you there. Okay, sign up early. Don't be disappointed. Okay, and I'm sure the three faces that you see here are likely to be there. So I look forward to seeing a lot of you that have attended today in person, and I can thank you no more. Pete, Ahmed, thank you. It's always a pleasure. If I don't see you before, I'll see you in January.